Hello, my name is Matthew Haywood. I work at Blockstream and I'll be presenting and also demonstrating the new Blockstream Liquid Securities platform. Before I give a demonstration of one of the main features of Liquid Securities, I'll give a brief overview of what security tokens are, a high-level look at some of the features of the Liquid network, and then I'll explain how Liquid Securities lets issuers manage liquid issued assets as security tokens. Then I'll run through a quick demonstration of how the Liquid Securities API allows asset issuers to manage investor records and apply transfer restrictions to the tokens they issue so that they can satisfy security token regulations. And for this, I'll be using the Blockstream Green desktop app, although it would also work with Blockstream Green Mobile, as both applications are already Liquid Securities enabled. Then I'll finally introduce our Liquid Securities beta program. The security tokens I'll be talking about are digital representations of an underlying security. Such a token can be traded without the need for intermediaries, and their digital nature means that reporting and tracking of ownership can be an automated process. For a security token issuer, this makes compliance and management of the token and the records of its investors a lot easier. We've chosen to implement our securities platform on top of Liquid as it provides many features that enhance the issuer's control of the token. I'm sure many of you have heard of the Liquid network, Blockstream's Bitcoin sidechain. There are many features of Liquid that make it an attractive proposition to users, including fast and final settlement, confidential transactions, user-issued assets, and atomic swaps. Liquid is built using Blockstream's open source Elements project and is managed by a growing federation of members from around the world. These features make Liquid an ideal choice for Bitcoin traders and exchanges as they enable faster, more confidential Bitcoin transactions. But one core feature of Liquid in particular, the ability to issue your own assets on the network, enables us to deliver security tokens on the Liquid network, with all the other features such as confidential transactions and rapid settlement also benefiting any tokens managed by the platform. So by extending the abilities of Liquid's issued assets, Liquid Securities allows issuers to easily configure the rule sets that define how the tokens can be transferred between investors. There's no need to write smart contract code or trawl the blockchain to track ownership. You just add your investors to Liquid Securities, define the requirements categories for a token, and associate eligible investors to those categories. Liquid Securities and the Green Wallet's authorized asset co-signing feature ensures that only the investors you define as eligible can then receive the token. Liquid Securities provides the issuer with reports on ownership and balances, while confidential transactions ensure that this information is not made public on the Liquid blockchain. It can also schedule the distribution of tokens to eligible investors as vesting shares, and record any dividend payments that the issuer then makes. Liquid Securities makes use of Blockstream Green's co-signing enforcement to simplify compliance. Firstly, the issuer uses Liquid Securities to issue and then distribute the asset, or security token in this context, to the green wallets of their investors. From this point onwards, every transaction made by the investors needs to pass through Green co-signing rules in order to be validated and authorized. When this request for transfer is processed, the Green server will recognize a Liquid Securities asset exchange and check with Liquid Securities to ensure that the recipient of the token is allowed to do so. Remember that these rules are defined and maintained by the issuer within Liquid Securities. If the recipient is eligible to receive the token, the transaction is co-signed and broadcast on the Liquid network and settled within a couple of minutes. Remember again that, as seen on the Liquid blockchain, the transaction is confidential between the sender and receiver. Outside of that, only the issuer is aware of the amount and asset being transferred, as they can view it through Liquid Securities API. There are currently two types of tokens that can be managed by Liquid Securities. These are both issued as assets on the Liquid network, and the only difference is the method by which Liquid Securities tracks and authorizes transfers between investors. We've termed them investor restricted and tracked. Both token types require that a transfer occurs between green Liquid Securities enabled wallets. This is to ensure that tokens can at all times be tracked and reported on by the issuer. Where they differ is how they apply investor eligibility rules. So investor restricted assets or tokens can only be transacted between investors that the issuer has already registered as eligible within Liquid Securities, whereas tracked tokens do not require the issuer to record investor details within Liquid Securities prior to transfer. Both types of token track transfers and require the use of a green wallet, but only investor restricted tokens restrict who can receive the token further than that. So as you can see on the slide, the only differences are based upon the need to pre-approve and register investors prior to those investors being able to take ownership of the token. The ability to restrict who is eligible to take ownership of the token is a key part of delivering security tokens using Liquid Securities, and so the demo will show this in use. At a high level, we'll attempt to send an amount of an example security token from an approved and registered investor to one that is not yet registered within Liquid Securities. We'll see the investor's green wallet reject the transaction, and then we'll register the second investor as eligible within Liquid Securities and try the transaction again, whereupon it will work.
In the example, an investor-restricted asset has already been issued and distributed. We've opened the green wallet of one of the investors that the asset was distributed to. Here we can see that the investor created a Liquid Securities account within the green desktop app to receive the initial asset distribution to. As the asset has been registered on the Blockstream asset registry, it shows by name and ticker instead of the asset hex seen on the Liquid blockchain. We can also view details of the asset on the Blockstream Liquid Explorer. We can see the ticker, the amount initially issued, the fact that the asset is reissuable, and the contract details that were issued with the asset, and also issuance and burn transactions that relate to the asset. Liquid Securities controls the transfer of assets to ensure that they are only transferable between investors that have been registered by the asset's issuer within Liquid Securities. The investors also need to provide a valid green Liquid Securities account ID and be a member of the categories that have been defined for the asset by the issuer. In our example, there is one category that the investor must be in, a category named Qualified Investors. Before we try and send some of the asset from one investor to another, let's take a look at how the asset and investor looks within Liquid Securities by making a few API calls. We're signed in as the asset issuer. Viewing the asset details, there's a few things to note here. The security was issued as an asset on the Liquid blockchain with the asset ID 2F19, etc. This is what we saw when we viewed the asset using the Liquid Block Explorer. We've also seen the ticker there, the fact that it's registered with the Blockstream asset registry, is authorized and investor restricted, mean that the asset is controlled by Liquid Securities using green address and the categories that can be defined within Liquid Securities. And for this asset, we can see that investors must be in category ID 4 to meet the requirements. So taking a look at that category, we can see that it's named Qualified Investors, and it only has one investor within it with ID 11, which if we take a look at the investor record for ID 11, we can see that it's the investor we're using the wallet of in green, and the green account IDs are the same, and that the investor is a member of category 4, which is the category associated with our asset as a requirement. So now let's try sending some of the asset from investor 1 to a new investor, investor 2. First, we will create the Liquid Securities account for investor 2 as a new wallet in green desktop. By doing this, we can simulate two investors with separate wallets on different machines. Now that the wallet's been created, we will name it as investor 2. And we must create a Liquid Securities sub-account within the wallet. Note that in a Liquid Securities account you get an account ID. We'll try sending from Investor 1, who is registered with Liquid Securities, to Investor 2. This shouldn't be allowed as we have not registered Investor 2's green account ID with Liquid Securities yet, or associated them with the qualified investors category, both of which are needed in order to transact the asset according to rules defined by the issuer. So this send should fail, which it does, saying the transaction contains assets that are not authorized, meaning the investor is not authorized to receive them. So let's create Investor 2 as an investor on Liquid Securities using the API, at the same time providing their green account ID. Okay, so note the ID returned, Investor ID 17, that the green address ID matches, and that they are not yet a member of any of the assets required categories. So now we'll need to associate the new investor record with the qualified assets category, which had an ID of 4. So we'll use the category of 4 and investor ID of 17. Now that we've created the investor with a green account ID and associated them with the required categories, the send from Investor 1 to the qualified Investor 2 should now work. So we'll get a receive address which the green server generates using the green account ID, and we'll send from Investor 1 some of the Bexa asset to the address of Investor 2. This should now work as the investor is qualified, which it does, and you can see pending transactions in both wallets. With the transaction confirmed, we can use another API call to check the balance of any given green account ID. So we'll check the balance of Investor 1's. So that shows Liquid Securities has knowledge of Investor 1 holding 998 of the asset, and the same for Investor 2 using their green account ID. Shows the correct tracked amount, a balance of 1 of asset 2F19. The example Python code that we've been calling only covers a few of the API calls that are possible, and here the full Liquid Securities API specification covers all the endpoints available to an issuer, covering investor management, asset management, and also reporting of activities, ownership, balances. And there's also the ability to blacklist UTXOs and also manage the assignments and distributions. And there's a full Python example that covers the whole API and supporting documentation available to users.
The Liquid Securities platform is available as an API. If you go to blockstream.com/liquid/securities, you'll be able to request a test access account, which will be valid for up to 60 days and allow you to issue 5 evaluation purpose assets as tokens on the network and manage them using the API. Thank you very much for your time.